Latin. So therefore, I feel a bit relaxed this morning. But we are not here to speak about Latin. Today, dear Monsignor Peter, we come because of you, because of this special day, as we are going to witness the episcopal ordination of yet another Christian of the Church in Kenya. And I think that many of you know, and that was also here shown this morning, that Father Peter Kimani has been working for years as a chaplain in the prisons. He knows that world and its citizens inside out. In many ways, we, ordinary people, we try to stay away from prisons and from its inhabitants. We even fear going there. It is a system which for many is shrouded in darkness and mystery behind walls and barbed wired fences. It's not something that you would do for a Sunday outing. And if you go there to visit maybe your family or your friends, you even will reflect twice whether you should bring your children along. In old times, the prison was called a carcer or a dungeon. And it implies a very dark and sinister system that people really want to keep away from. In many ways, that concept of dungeon is, of course, also connected to our idea of purgatory or hell even. And let's face it, even if the prison is clean and provided with all kinds of facilities, a hell it remains. To be robbed of your freedom is always a difficult thing to accept. To be behind bars and in chains is not what the average person desires in his life. Father Peter Kimani comes from that kind of reality. He has worked there for many years, and he came to know the prisoners by name. He listened to their stories and came to understand their fear and frustrations. Yes, sure, some of the prisoners may have committed heinous crimes, but even they, the worst of criminals, have families, have children, have dreams, and even have good intentions. People can be murderers and rapists, but there are also many other things than that. That is what Peter Kimani came to know about those prisoners. He came to know those human stories about their pain and their suffering in the prison system. Peter worked so long in the prisons that his friends started to call him the prisoner, because it seemed he would never get out of there again. A lifelong sentence it was, so it seemed. The life of Peter Kimani, reminds me in a way of the life of St. Paul the Apostle. Actually, frankly speaking, I was a bit surprised that in the choice of the readings of today, that aspect was not highlighted. Paul calls himself a prisoner of Christ, and he speaks more than once of him being in chains for Christ. Peter Kimani, in many ways, is like St. Paul of Tarsus. Paul, you may not know it or you never realize it, Paul was imprisoned a lot. Clement of Rome, one of our saints, claims that Paul was 7 times behind bars. Paul himself says about himself that he suffered far more imprisonments than any of his rival apostles. And we, as Christians, as church, we have imagined many reasons why Paul was in prison, because he was a philosopher. Maybe Paul was a political prisoner, or Paul was just wrongfully accused. And Paul, the Roman citizen, had asked for a trial, and therefore he was taken to Rome to be there under house arrest. And finally, from there, he was executed, he was beheaded. As it sometimes is called, Paul inhabited a whippable body, one that could be hit or be locked away by the local authorities without too much of noise, with impunity. You could imprison people very easily for some kind of vague accusation like disorderly conduct. Paul's treatment was the same for many in ancient Rome, especially if you were poor, homeless, or of an ethnic group that marked him as a part of an occupied people. Which is to say, Paul looked a lot like those who get over-policed and thrown into jail today, not only in Kenya, but all over the world. And even today, many of our judicial systems contribute to the same. Some of our people will be thrown into prison for relatively minor violations, while others, especially for crimes that involve more than 10 million shilling, or those who have powerful friends, they will never make it to prison. You might have committed a heinous crime, but you will be able to escape prison unscathed. There is a saying that the law is the same for everybody, but not everybody is the